Work with your consciousness until it ceases to function on the level of problem and begins to function on the level of answer. And it's mathematically certain that your problem will be solved if you do this. You may not find this the easiest thing in the world to do, but even though it may be difficult at times, you must never permit yourself to become discouraged. The reward is certain. As I've mentioned in previous presentations, the Global Free Society concept works on 7 key strategies which are not changeable. And each strategy is made up of many tactics which are definitely changeable. That's the ideal, as the input from 7 billion odd people is far better than just the input of one. And with the end of the monetary system, the political system, and a new global outlook, it now means we can relook at many aspects of life and how we live on planet Earth in general. The new concept challenges us to relook at everything and question if that paradigm still suits us, or are there better ways more in line with our long-term plans? With the global outlook, we can now revisit many ideas with only one goal in mind: what's best for us on planet Earth. So it's not just the strategies that are vitally important, it's the tactics we deploy to achieve these strategies that are extremely important. Now, some of these tactics we've already touched upon, as I felt it was necessary to introduce them earlier into the discussion than I have in the book. So we'll run through the 11 tactics as outlined in the free downloadable book and spend more time on the topics not covered so far. Of course, this is not a definitive list by any means, as the new opportunities are actually limitless. This instead is a creative exercise, an example of how we can now do what humans do best: adapt. So tactic 1, maximize the benefits of the internet. Now, many people share my concerns over privacy and the ability the internet offers for a big brother scenario where the population is scrutinized in minute and invasive detail, and where the leaders of society can influence your thoughts and opinion by managing the information you receive, or just as importantly, the information you do not receive. We'll certainly need to achieve the correct balance of information that our society needs from all its members to become more efficient in everything we do. More efficiency means less wastage, less pollution, and less unnecessary work, and they're all key points in achieving our society goals. But at what level does this data collection become an infringement on privacy? We must collect data for our greater benefit, but we can collect that data anonymously. There is no need for names to be associated with the data, just gender, age, health status, qualifications, etc. For example, the society would benefit from collecting information about buying behaviours, as this will facilitate far more efficient production and distribution in all product categories. We would benefit by collecting information on individuals' qualifications, as this will better enable us to direct our education system into areas where we have projected shortfalls in our workforce. And it will benefit our society from collecting general and specific information about health status of all its population, because this will allow us to better forecast production of medication and allocate hospital facilities. The benefits of collecting mass data about its society members are immense, and they are very necessary. But these few examples represent a tiny fraction of the many advantages to our society by collecting and sharing information from a central point. So collecting data is going to be necessary, but it will not infringe on anyone's privacy, as it would be anonymous. So why are people so concerned about privacy in the world today? Well, I guess there are as many personal reasons as there are people, but let's look at what we could consider to be the 2 most obvious. The first is the worry of an overreaching government having access to your personal information, which we've already discussed. But remember, we do not have a system of governments that should concern you in this way anymore. We run a system of pure democracy. We govern ourselves. So that fear should at least be greatly reduced. The other reason is, of course, somebody's ability to make money from your data, and that could be in a multitude of ways. But think, we've now eradicated the monetary system, so that risk has now been eradicated. Your reasoning could just simply be that your business is your business, as simple as that. And that's fine. But if you do agree to share your data in a completely secure way, the benefits could be very big. It would allow us to make life far more easier by utilizing technology already at our disposal. So as we've already discussed, our aim in the free society must be to make everything as automatic and simple as possible to reduce unnecessary labour for us all. And of course, automation is a key tactic to allow us to realise our vision statement of a life that prioritises the individual's time and freedom. Now, automation in every aspect of our daily lives is what will allow us to rethink our current position and to work on the leisure-time balance. So the automation is digital as well as physical. But that's just general data for the wider society's benefit. What about you? What about the individual? Having a society account where everything about you is stored in one place would make life so much easier. Let's look at the more superficial benefits first. Let me ask you a question. How many passwords and separate accounts do you currently have? 10? 20? 30? Imagine if we consolidated all of that into just one account. The idea is to place all your personal information into one very secure and very private location. And that could be your qualifications, work history, immediate family details, health records, everything you choose to be placed there. And even storing your personal body measurements will help, as we'll see a little later. So now let's look at the less superficial. Let's look at how this could help with health. The society account will be your portal where you acquire all the goods, services, apply for jobs, book tickets, etc. all on one application, one personalised web page and mobile app for everything. And storing all your medical records within your account has massive benefits. So imagine now doing your food shopping via the internet. All allergies that you have listed on your medical records would allow the app to highlight anything that you have chosen that could cause you a reaction. And this could be a simple task globally, as we've now centralised all our production. Now all the data required to advise you in this area will be loaded into the global database before the goods are made available. Wheat-free, gluten-free, whatever your personal dietary needs, this could be filtered as you look through the goods. And even restaurants could provide data on their ingredients, which would allow the app to instantly warn you which dishes to avoid before you even get to the restaurant. Imagine now that you've been put on a new medication. Maybe it's a brand new medication distributed to the whole of our society. Now we have the ability for immediate, real-time feedback from all the patients taking the new medication. And it could be as simple as logging into your own protected account, clicking on your health section, and then the drug you want to leave the feedback on. The current system globally of feedback takes months, if not years, and we could realise this vital feedback instantly in real time, in all categories. Now let's look at jobs. Jobs would be much easier to find, as all available positions would be viewable through your society app. And applying would be extremely simple, as your work history, current location, and anything pertinent to that role is stored within that app. You would just need to click to apply. Another great advantage to having a single app for careers is that we could list every job within our entire society. Whether it's currently filled or not is irrelevant. And that would mean you could view the job roles you really want and leave your interest for when the position does become available. And as soon as the current worker indicates that they are leaving the position, you'd be informed and you could apply instantly. And if you have certain skills or qualifications, you could then make yourself available to any areas within our society that you would consider moving to. And they would then contact you. And again, the balance of worker and employer is far healthier without a monetary system. And that's a great segue into the next benefit, housing. Housing would be very easy to administer compared to the long and drawn out processes we endure today. So the system I suggest is that all houses available are on the web accessed via our society account. You simply then look through the various houses that interest you and maybe arrange a viewing. If you want to proceed, then you simply click on the apply button. And basically that's all you need to do, because all your personal details relevant to your eligibility are downloaded immediately. And of course, as we've mentioned before, with higher resource commodities like housing, we have to have some common sense applied. So if you're a single guy applying for a 6-bedroom house, then of course others with larger families will get preference over you. Remember, this is a system of equity, not equality. Therefore, your housing choices will be limited by your personal circumstances. So if you had any disabilities, how many children you have. And relocating or just moving nearer to your job role again would give you priority as a contributing member. So no need to give notice on your current house, no need to sell your existing property, no need to wait until someone else decides they want your property, no more property chains to worry about. Those days could be gone. And when it's your house, the same as ownership today. No need to even put the old house up for relisting, as that would be done almost automatically with you just needing to add some pictures and property details. And once you've been accepted and given a moving date, that's it. You just book the removal firm through your society account, and that's it. Does it need to be any more complicated than that? And of course, controlling content from the internet would be much easier too. So with just one app, you could block certain topics that you don't want to be exposed to, which is especially helpful for managing what your children view. But choosing topics you do like would now become essential if you wanted to be updated on the latest developments within your chosen interest. Why? Because now we have no adverts. And shopping in general would be so much easier. With your own personal body measurements, the app will be able to choose the right size for you. And even acquiring goods like bikes or sports equipment would allow the app to guide or select the right size for you as recommended by the manufacturer. And as a contributing member, you would gain priority over non-contributing members booking any services, so theatre tickets, movies, restaurants, all services in general. And booking tradesmen would also be much easier, something I think we'd all welcome. So you simply detail the job that needs doing, apply online, and a qualified person will be allocated to do that job. This system is then able to feed back any shortfalls in services such as tradesmen in your local area. For example, if you did request an electrician and the date given was many months away, obviously this is not acceptable. The system would then feed that data back to the local council, who would then be able to look to readdress this shortfall in services in your area. And they would have several options available to them to bring in more tradesmen, including through the education system. This would be a longer term solution, but they could also look at retraining of the adult population. And running a local recruitment drive is not something we don't know how to do. And so if you're fed up with the lack of electricians, plumbers, or any tradesmen in your region, then you could even consider training in one of those roles yourself. There's no financial advantage or disadvantage. And this is just a very quick example of how a centralised system could work far smoother than the current systems we have in place today. Having everything linked and connected would make all aspects of our lives so much easier and stress-free. And the benefits are endless, and I'm sure we could discuss this topic for many hours, as a centralised system offers untold benefits. And we could talk about the limitless ways you can now customise your own web experience to make everything more relevant to your own particular likes or dislikes. And we could talk about how adverts would now be a thing of the past. Imagine that, no adverts ever. And we could talk about how much easier it would be to access all your info with just one password. So if at the beginning you were one of the people who were horrified at the thought of putting all your personal information in just one place, then let me ask you this. Your personal information is already out there somewhere. Wouldn't you rather it just be in one highly secure place where you could choose what you share? Tactic 2. Ensure quality in all areas of our society. Now, I would not blame anyone trying to understand the kind of society I'm trying to convey if they thought that ending the monetary system would mean a drop in the quality of products and services. So that needs to be addressed as a priority. In the main, I believe that the vast majority of people will always want to do their best for their fellow society members just out of personal pride. But then I do have a lot of faith in my fellow human beings. But what I believe would be more galvanising is the immense sense of pride in what we're working to achieve, our long-term plan for humanity. And that, I believe, will be the biggest driving factor in making this new society a success, and a success globally. With the tactics in place that we're about to discuss, quality of products and services would be increased, not decreased. And here's how. In time, society members will find job roles that they prefer, not just because they pay well. And that's the situation we largely have today. How many of you chose a career path mainly because of the income possibilities? We will also realise that any official jobs in our society are there because there is a real need for that job role, a need that has a real benefit to other society members. You are working for the benefit of society, your neighbours, your friends and your family. You are now not working for some faceless investor or banker, and you're not there just to circulate money. All jobs offer the same benefits, and all jobs need to be filled for our society to function. Having said that, there will be certain individuals that will take a job just to gain the benefits that a contributing member enjoys. And they will have no care about standards or the society's goals and aims. They may not care if they're sacked from their job because surely they can just go and get another one. Quality control is our society's insurance policy against this type of person and even second-rate products and services. And the internet is the vehicle that will deliver this. The idea is that every part of our society, shops, services, schooling, and the councils will have their own website. So this web page will give details of the business, the products and the services it offers. Everything you generally see today. But now we'll add an additional element, quality control or customer feedback as it's better known. And this is where you can give direct feedback about the business, product or service, good or bad. Both are equally important. So let's take a restaurant just as a working example. As a negative example, let us say you visited the restaurant and the staff were very unfriendly. The service was extremely poor and the food was barely edible. So unless you're English, the first thing you would do is complain. If you're unhappy with the response, you would then choose to leave the feedback directly on the website. And of course, we have many apps today where you can share feedback, but this will be directly on the website. Sure, this is great for other customers who want to visit that restaurant, but it does serve another purpose. In the book, I detail the Quality Control Council, and their main responsibility is to ensure we as contributing members are getting a fair service back for our own time and efforts. Remember, nothing is free. You're paying through your own work. So, everyone is entitled to a bad day. We will all receive some negative feedback at some stage in our careers. But this system of feedback is for highlighting a more general trend of dissatisfaction within any service or product. The council will then be able to investigate the issues and take positive action. And this could be retraining or even closing the business by removing the resources that were being supplied. You can then apply that ethos of feedback to every aspect of our society, ensuring our resources are used wisely and efficiently. This is a very brief explanation taken from the book of how I would foresee us ensuring everyone who wants to contribute is doing so to a degree that is of a standard we all deserve. And the system is using feedback through the web in real time and using very low human resource, which is very important as we know. So if we're going to expect people to embrace a new society structure, then we must have assurances that things will be at least the same in terms of choice and quality. and of course a real chance of it being much, much better. So imagine now restaurants where owners are freed from the restraints and worry of making a financial profit. Imagine how much better the experience would be going to a restaurant where the owners run the business for a love of food and for hosting guests. Isn't that a recipe for success? Excuse the pun. Imagine going to any facility where the people running it do so because they have an interest in their business and not for any financial, monetary reasons. But this feedback needs to be a two-way street. We as individuals also need to ensure we're responsible too. With added freedoms comes added responsibility. Reducing our working week to just 3 days a week will require our society members to make more physical effort as well. And one of the areas where we can all make a huge difference and collectively reduce the physical manpower required is in this area of personal responsibility. When we hire cars, vans, motorbikes, camper vans and machinery, returning them in good condition is now more necessary than in the current monetary system. Why should we employ people just to clean the products you use when you're able to do that yourself, mostly? Think how much manpower we could save if we made sure our hotel rooms were in good condition when we left. And I don't mean clean to the standard you found the room in exactly. We still need cleaners. I just mean consider the cleaner and try to make their workload less. The same ethos in fast food restaurants. And we talked about electric cars being available in major cities. Imagine how quickly they would be unusable if people didn't at least leave the inside of the vehicle in the good condition they found it in. What about people booking services or tickets for events and they're not using them? You know the attitude, just book them. If we can't go, it doesn't matter because they're free. So there is a worry that certain society members could abuse the system, so we need a feedback tool to ensure they don't for the benefit of everyone. The idea here then would be that if the part of society has provided you with a service and you don't use it or you leave it in a bad condition, then that provider should be able to leave feedback on you. The reason for this is because we all want to reduce the necessity for work to a minimum, and we can do that by people simply being considerate. If they don't, then just as the businesses would come under scrutiny, then so would an individual for persistent abuse. I'm not referring to one-off instances, but continual negative feedback. The same as any business that we've already discussed. We would then be able to reduce the services offered to that person until they can behave in a more acceptable manner. This is why quality control is necessary in all aspects of our society in some form or another, to ensure we get a fair return for our own work and our own efforts. And we need to reduce job roles to an absolute minimum. Tactic 3, prioritise leisure time. We've already discussed this topic and how it would increase happiness, productivity, personal health, reduce crime and generally make life worth living. And it's by far my favourite topic. So let's work to live, not live to work. And as we've already covered this, let's move on. Tactic 4, quality food production. The whole purpose of the food industry at present is to make money. To put the minimum in and extract the most out. That's how you make a profit. And to make their food more appealing, they add all sorts of additives, flavour enhancements, colouring, sugar and chemicals to increase the shelf life. None of that is of benefit to you ultimately, and it's to ensure they make more money. Obviously this has a well-documented effect on everyone, so allergies, obesity and addiction to name a few. But now the tables have turned, and the purpose of the food industry is now not to make a profit because we've eliminated the monetary system. So let us remind ourselves what the remit of the Agricultural Council's objective could be from the previous example. To provide the very best nutritional and sustainable produce utilising production techniques that are beneficial and non-harmful to the human body as well as the environment. So my point here is not that we would need to immediately stop producing convenience foods and sugary drinks. People obviously enjoy them. But we can now address these issues in ways which are not viable previously because of the monetary system. And we can decide if it makes more sense to produce food locally to lessen our dependency on preservatives. And we can decide to remove chemicals that are there just to make the product more visually appealing. And we can decide to look for quality alternatives to refined sugars, which are added to an unbelievable amount of foodstuffs. We can decide, the people, as the Core Council will be working under the directives put in place by our collective will. Health above profit changes the dynamics completely now in all food production. In the book and under the heading of education, one of the compulsory lessons I suggested could be health and nutrition. Making our younger generation far more aware of the long-term dangers associated from a poor diet will allow them to make better personal choices about what they put in their body. This will of course help, but it cannot be the whole answer. We now need to look at addressing the balance on the high street, and giving a healthy and tasty alternative to the current big brand offerings has to be a key tactic. Teaching our children about healthcare through diet is therefore a key tactic that would aid this development. But is it really a pipe dream we cannot overcome? To make available a healthy fast food chain that is available as the big brands today? It cannot be. But there's little point educating the population about nutrition and good eating habits if the availability of good quality nutritional food is not widespread enough to make it convenient. And through our new system of pure democracy, we get to decide, not the industry. And no executive is going to get fat on the back of us getting fat. Excuse the pun. Tactic 5. Healthcare for all, prevention and cure being the only concerns. Now, we've already addressed two very significant tactics in enabling humans to live a long and healthy life. And the first one was making leisure time a priority, allowing us time to really enjoy our bodies. And the second was the topic that we've just discussed, food production and nutrition. Therefore, prevention has to be of the utmost importance and achievable in a meaningful way. In my book, I looked at the profitability analysis of privately held businesses in general. And SageWorks, a financial analysis company, found that 4 out of the 10 most profitable industries in the US are healthcare related. So from dentists to chiropractors to outpatient care facilities. Now, this is not turnover, this is profit, the bit left over after all the expenses have been paid. But this isn't just a US trend, it's a global trend with physicians, healthcare in general and outpatients all listed as 3 of the most profitable business sectors out of 11 worldwide. So while we have millions of people globally suffering on a daily basis with no access to healthcare, we have other more fortunate people making vast profits from overly high profit margins, making healthcare even more inaccessible. And under the current monetary system, this trend will not only continue, but that will escalate. As most people are aware, and I detail in my book, the world's wealth is shifting at an alarming rate higher and higher up the social chain. The rich are becoming obscenely wealthy, while the available money for the normal people becomes less and less. This means that for the very profitable industries that want to maintain their profit margin in a decreasing market of potential customers, they will have to increase their charges even more. The longer term effect is obvious. Healthcare will become even more unobtainable for the average person. And as long as this trend of wealth migration continues, so will the costs of healthcare escalate as the available market, the people that can afford to pay, becomes smaller and smaller. Now, I'm lucky living in the UK where we have a national healthcare system available to all, but I'm constantly shocked and appalled at the stories I see and hear globally of fellow human beings being denied access to healthcare purely for financial reasons. And I'm equally disgusted at watching human beings financially imprisoned into debt slavery as they try and pay for the treatment they need just to live. All in the name of profit, and this seems complete madness. Financially enslaving someone for the rest of his or her life and withholding treatment because of a lack of money is nothing short of exploitation. Unless there's a political party out there that stands to a chance of gaining power and puts free healthcare at the top of their priorities, then I think the free society seems the only viable option where universal healthcare would become a reality. And apart from the unbelievably joyous prospect of relieving everyone in our society from their financial debt, the other amazing benefit is that standards in global healthcare will increase exponentially. Now we will have a singular, elected and ethically responsible governing body managing and directing all research into quality healthcare for everyone. Any conflicts of interest would immediately be removed. So what do I mean by that? Imagine now that you're working in the cancer industry, and as it stands today, it's globally worth about 172.6 billion. Now imagine you're a cancer researcher and you discover a cure for all cancers in the form of a simple one-application tablet that costs only a few dollars to produce. How do you think your bosses would react? Do you think you get a pat on the back, a nice bonus maybe? Well, you've just crashed an entire industry, so I don't think you'll be getting that bonus. And of course there must be conflicts of interest within the health industry. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to realise it's far more profitable to treat a patient's symptoms than to actually provide a cure. And removing the profit from healthcare is the only way we can be sure we are all working to the same goal, to relieve or eliminate suffering. Tactic 6. Make law and order easier to achieve by giving responsibility back to the people. In my book Global Free Society, I go into much detail about how many new laws and bills were passed in the period before the book was completed. Now, one scary statistic stands out to me, and that is that in the UK in 2010, a total of 3,506 new laws were introduced. And 98% were introduced as statutory instruments which don't even require a full debate in Parliament. To me, this was an obscene amount of new laws to pass in just one country, until I saw how many were passed in the US. State lawmakers were busy passing more than 40,000 new bills, ones that tackle everything from drones to food stamp benefits. New laws like these are being imposed on the global population daily, by the hour, year on year, without our consent. We're now in a position where it would be absolutely impossible for any regular member of society to be aware of all the laws, rules and regulations which we are supposed to abide by. As a direct result, we have a sizable proportion of our society employed specifically just to inform us on how we're allowed to behave both privately and within industry. In fact, legal services was listed by Forbes as the number 2 most profitable industry on the planet. As the saying goes, create a new law and you create a new industry. But what a strange state of affairs we've allowed to happen, and what an immense waste of human resource. But it gets worse. In the UK and America, we've had new acts or bills passed that have completely undermined our society and the very rights, not privileges, we all used to take for granted. I'm of course referring to the Civil Contingencies Bill in the UK and the ironically named Patriots Act in America. And both these new forms of possibly illegal powers allow government to impose actions against individuals which are in direct opposition to the British Bill of Rights and the American Constitution. The recent changes to the Constitution have in fact been dismantling the inherent safeguards built into the system and placing more power into the hands of the government, or more worryingly, those that control our governments. Surveillance of the population is now a huge business. Until 1986 in the UK, there were severe restrictions on the police and the state's ability to carry out surveillance on its citizens. Phone tapping and the interception of private communications was inadmissible in court and heavily penalised. But since 1986, an altogether different approach has been adopted. The last time I checked, the UK citizen was one of the most surveilled citizens on the whole planet. But I don't remember giving my consent to that. So when will this ever stop? When is the last time you ever heard about laws being reduced and freedoms increased? I guess about the same time you heard taxes were being reduced. Now, if I plotted all these new laws and regulations on a chart and then continue with the trend, where would it end? When would we reach a point where no new laws or regulations would be necessary? Would it be 10 years, 20 years, 100 years? Now, when I wrote the book, I never envisaged I would be alive to witness the recent global events brought about by the COVID-19 so-called pandemic. Overnight, many governments gave themselves powers to close businesses, to force people to remain in their homes, stop them from visiting the family, and stopped people from purchasing goods the government felt were not essential. And then there was the mask issue. There was also serious talk about forced vaccinations. Now, with all the health concerns and serious questions about vaccines' effectiveness, certain government individuals believed they could, by force if necessary, make you take that shot. There was also serious talk about introducing tracking of all citizens, either by phone app or microchipping you. And then even more draconian laws were suggested and considered, such as only allowing travel to people that have had the completely untested vaccine and could prove it by showing a certificate of vaccination. And withholding welfare was another strategy suggested to force people to comply. We also all witnessed the most blatant censorship taking place on all the mainstream media platforms and social media platforms, so Google, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter and YouTube. And I couldn't believe, and I still can't believe, what I'm witnessing. Any dialogue that was challenging the official narrative was deleted almost instantly. Independent researchers who had been sharing information for many, many years had their platforms demonetized or worse, deleted. Of course, the mainstream media were touting the official narrative with hardly anyone challenging what appears to be blatant inconsistencies in the official story. But where was the balance? This was the biggest abuse of power I've ever witnessed in my life, and at the present moment it's still going on. And the simple fact that we all have rights was overlooked even by the large majority of the population. The statement that made me really concerned was that our rights have been suspended. How can you suspend people's rights? You can't. You either have rights or you don't. By the simple fact that they are rights, you cannot even suspend them. You can ask for compliance, nothing more. The government's ability to change the law and to make their actions seem lawful has to end. If not, this could end very badly for all of us. Our basic human rights have to be redefined and upheld rigorously by the laws that we the people put in place. I love this statement from Jack Fresco from the Venus Project. Whenever you make a law, thou shalt not kill, some jackass thinks that by making a law you can control human behaviour. Conditions that exist control human behaviour, not the laws. And that's the point of this discussion. Conditions do control human behaviour. The first thing that should become blatantly obvious to all watching is that under a free society, crime rates will drop immensely. And not just from making goods and basic living standards easily achievable, but also by other measures that we've discussed, such as education and empowering the population in general. Simplification of laws must become a key strategy. We must find ourselves in a position where society members instinctively know what is right and what is wrong. And we do not need a governing body to direct our daily lives and freedoms in such an overbearing manner as we see today. And as I've said before, if you give people responsibility, they become more responsible. Now, if we go back to the mission statement I shared at the beginning, you might remember this. We shall ensure freedom for everyone in all aspects of the meaning, with simple laws agreed by consensus, allowing all to follow and adhere to without restricting personal choice. So what I'm suggesting now is that we abolish all laws that stop us doing anything that does not negatively affect anyone else. So if my actions do not cause harm to anyone, to property, to wildlife or the environment, then our society cannot pass laws to stop me doing so. This is our basic right, surely. How can we allow anyone to impose laws on us that do not affect anyone else? So no laws telling us we should wear a seatbelt, crash helmet, not give food to the homeless, not consume raw milk or collect rainwater on our own property, and not purchase alcohol at certain times of the day, etc., etc. Yet these are all laws applicable to us depending on where you live in the world today. And these are just a very few examples of laws that are completely unnecessary and go against our own basic freedoms. And at the very best, they could be guidelines or recommendations. Freedom of speech. Freedom of speech is one of the rights inherent in our vision statement and cannot be compromised. How can we have a global free society without free speech? You can't. And we must certainly never allow a situation like the current one where the media bosses dictate to you what to believe. And censorship never works efficiently anyway. All it does is force extreme views underground and gives even more power to those who are affiliated with that information. And we must we must keep everything in the open where we can assess what is really going on in our society. Allowing people the freedom to enjoy their life as they see fit is at the very core of a free society. And as such, it must also relate to recreational drugs. Now, drugs have been used by man for centuries, both as a medicine and for mind-altering properties. And they've been used in religious or spiritual rites since the dawn of man. Researchers have found equipment used to prepare hallucinogenic drugs for sniffing and dated them back to prehistoric South American tribes. And even animals have been found to consume substances for their mind-altering properties. Monkeys, elephants, horses, sheep and reindeer, to name just a few, consume fruits and lichens to get drunk or high. And it's even now been discovered that dolphins intentionally get high on pufferfish nerve toxins by carefully chewing them and even sharing their experience by passing them around to other members of the group. So it could then be argued that taking substances for their mind-altering effects is quite natural, part of nature. So why do we globally have such strong views on recreational drugs? In some countries you can openly buy a weapon that could kill someone, but be arrested for buying a tablet that makes you feel good. Various efforts to ban some and all forms of drugs go back centuries, often championed on religious grounds. And some of the earliest reports of control of substances dates back to the 7th century, where alcohol and hashish was banned under Islamic law. And this war has been fought globally since then, but with what results? Have we won the war yet? Are we near an end? And what has been the casualty rate in the battle against our fellow human beings after nearly 5 decades? Well, let's look at the results from America, where arguably some of the most aggressive and stringent tactics have been employed. And when I finished the book in 2015, the war on drugs have received over $1 trillion in funding, and the population of Americans incarcerated for drug offences had soared from 40,000 in 1980 to 500,000 in 2013. And today in 2020, the number has risen to nearly 700,000. That's almost half the entire prison population. The cost of this incarceration at the time was about $12.6 billion a year. Today, the Drug Policy Alliance, which advocates for an end to the war on drugs, estimates that the United States spends $51 billion annually on initiatives just to control illegal drugs. The cost in terms of human suffering are just as extraordinary and ridiculous. Hundreds of thousands of people have lost their lives over this unwinnable war, mainly in street battles for dominance over the illegal drug supplies. And villages are laid to siege in the countries that supply the drugs, as the drug lords go to any lengths to protect their highly profitable business. And families have been torn apart in every corner of the planet. In 2018, 45,000 people in America died from overdose of illegal drugs, which surprisingly is less than half the 100,000 people that died from legal prescription drugs taken at the recommended dosage. The situation is still the same, with legal drugs killing more people than illegal. So isn't this the real issue with legal drugs? The number of fatal overdoses and long-term harmful effects associated with taking these illegal drugs is greatly increased simply due to the supply being driven underground. It forces society members to buy their chosen drug from unregulated and uncontrolled suppliers. Heroin, for example, is nearly always cut, sometimes with very harmful additives such as glass bleach or talcum powder. And you may be surprised to learn that the main harmful effects to the body come from these additions and not the drug itself. Of course, long-term use of any drug has harmful effects on the body, but driving the usage underground only makes the problem much, much greater. I mean, did you know that roughly 10% of the UK population have used recreational drugs in the last year? And did you know that in the UK, around 1/3 of adults aged 16 to 59 have taken drugs at some point during their lifetime? I imagine the statistics are similar in most Western countries. In reality, we are fighting a war that just cannot be won. Millions of people's lives are affected horrifically as a result of banning recreational drugs. And huge resources are being wasted trying to enforce a moral standpoint by the government that is put in place by some of the very people that they've declared war on. Forcing the drug industry underground creates theft, violence and unnecessary health issues on the users, which then have to be dealt with through the healthcare system, utilising even more resource. And anyone caught using or supplying these drugs is then likely to be destined to a life of crime, unable to join society as a valuable and contributing member with the obligatory negative effect on the family, especially the dependents. So all this needless pain and suffering, and for what reason? To stop fellow humans from doing nothing more than going out at the weekend and partying with their friends, listening to music and having a good time. And to stop law-abiding society members from relaxing with their friends in their own homes, smoking or ingesting a natural plant which just relaxes them. To live in harmony in a global free society, we must all understand that not everyone will share our beliefs, values and morals. Imposing our viewpoints on others is not part of the ethics of a truly global free society. So long as a person's actions do not harm anyone else, then we are free to explore whatever lifestyles we choose. And allowing the free use of recreational drugs may seem like a step too far, but it's very obvious that trying to ban the usage does not work, and in fact makes all the issues related to their use far worse for the individual and then the wider society. I mean, we would of course need to vote on what the rules that should govern their use. No minors, no working machinery, but again, that's the point. It will be down to us to decide the parameters of the usage, but not the legality to use them. And if you're definitely against the use of recreational drugs, then that's fine, we can accommodate you too. It's very simple, simply don't take them. It really is that simple, it's called self-regulation. And the other argument is that what could be considered soft drugs are actually gateway drugs to more hardcore addictive drugs. I don't agree. I believe there is only one gateway drug, and that's the society we've built. In the main, the people that abuse drugs do so as an escape from reality and the hopelessness that they feel. In the society we live in today, people try to escape their reality in many other ways, through all sorts of addictions, sugar, alcohol, prescription drugs, and even excessive use at the gym. So abuse of recreational drugs, in fact all abuses, are just a symptom of the society that we have built. A society where there is not enough money or opportunity to go around. A society where we have to have losers for there to be winners. Where we hold up impossible examples of luxury and privilege the average person knows they will never be able to reach. And only the very strong-minded will not feel like a failure when compared to these unrealistic examples of success we see in the media all the time. But if we're making a society where that hopelessness is greatly reduced, where people will feel valued, that they have as much opportunity as everybody else, then we can treat each other like adults and allow them to make their own decisions as they see fit. And we need to get away from the belief that anyone who uses recreational drugs is some sort of worthless, dysfunctional member of society. That really is not the case. There is no evidence to support that viewpoint whatsoever. It just seems quite hypocritical to me that the vast majority of people that would object to the legalisation of recreational drugs would do so with an alcoholic drink in their hand. Because they know the government allows them to get high that way, they feel they're on some moral high ground. All I'm saying is that we should now think for ourselves, look at the evidence and make our own decisions. Let's put the power of choice back in the hands of the individual. It really is that simple. Tactic 7, the controversial part, the end of the prison service as we know it. Now this tactic is about ending the barbaric practice of locking human beings up for countless years on end. And let's face it, from the facts and figures regarding reoffending, it's clear that prison is less about rehabilitation and more about keeping the dangerous and less desirable society members away from the population. And if you remember, the solution I offered would still remove the undesirables from our society, but also use far, far less resources. And of course, reduce the possibility of harm to the hundreds of thousands of prison officers around the world. And it might also be a good way to let the offenders understand the real benefits of abiding by our simple laws for the benefit of all, which is highly desirable if they're ever to come back into our society. So as we've already discussed, this and the idea I put forward about community service, we can move on to the next tactic. Tactic 8, the role of the military. The long-term plan for our global free society is to incorporate all countries into our society as quickly as possible. And each country will be allowed an equal say through the individual and the country council's representation in all decisions. And when we finally reach that point, there will be no need for any military presence at all, because after all, who would we fight? And we will be united in opportunity and a vision for the future of humanity and planet Earth. I would like to think that we could achieve that in our lifetimes, but to be realistic, it will likely be many years before we could realise the amazing dream and the dream of global peace. But don't be disheartened. Even as we develop our new society, we would have the opportunity to reduce this drain on manpower and completely wasted resources. Even as we incorporate new countries into the society, we could reduce the military burden through agreeing to only maintaining forces in direct relation to the perceived threat. For example, let us assume that what we're asked to believe is true is actually true. That the real military threat comes from North Korea and Iran. In the example I used in the book, the first countries to join the Global Free Society would have a combined military presence of roughly 11 million soldiers. Korea and Iran have a combined force of about 5 million. Aircraft, helicopters, tanks, artillery, warships and submarines are roughly in that same ratio, so 2 to 1. Bearing in mind, this is just an example. Because the point I'm making is that as the society grows through adding new member countries, our need to maintain such resource-rich military hardware reduces. And we've already discussed the ending of the monetary system, and that would see at least 30% of our current jobs made redundant. The military, on a longer term view, could also offer us massive ability to free up manpower and divert all that human and technological resources into something positive and not negative. The military is a massive resource drain and has absolutely zero positive effect on any nations except in the defence of one's country. But now there's no monetary system, there's no financial benefit to taking democracy to other countries, and the chances of conflict are greatly reduced. And with no politicians to push their own agenda, we're far less likely to see war on the scale that we've witnessed in the last 2 centuries. So a system of pure democracy seems the only way we could truly end the rich man's racket. And think of the amazing technologies that can now be developed for civilian use as opposed to the purely military applications. And imagine now what the world would look like today if we never had any armies and we used all that resource, technical know-how and innovation purely for the benefit of us all. The world would look completely different to what it does today. Makes you think, doesn't it? Tactic 9. an open and honest society. Since the early days of civilization, the masses have been controlled by the rulers through manipulation and restriction of information. The early pharaohs ensured that the populace was kept in the dark through imposing a death sentence upon anyone found reading or writing that were not officially sanctioned. And only the highest and most trusted in the society were taught to read and write. Control of the population through control of the information is not a new tactic for mass control. In the Global Free Society book I wrote in 2015, I wrote the following statement. For those of us in the civilized West, we think of the media as being generally reliable in their reporting. Most know or suspect that each channel of media will apply their own version of spin on the stories, depending upon their own personal alliances or interests. We don't, however, as a rule, suspect their stories to be pure lies or propaganda. We generally save that judgment for the more totalitarian governments as China, North Korea, where the press is openly controlled by the authorities. Most people would find it very hard to believe that our free press is as manipulated and controlled as those in totalitarian countries, but the facts say it is, only more subtly. Well, in the 6 years that have passed since I wrote that, the situation has greatly changed, and certainly not for the better. In 2015, I reported that 90% of the media was owned by just 6 companies. Today, that's now 5. This consolidation now opens up the entire country and the world to be fed biased information to push a particular agenda and lies even. And that agenda would be chosen by the owners, administered by the workers who want to keep their employment. But imagine if all those owners shared the same agenda, one that doesn't have your best interests at heart, which scarily seems to be exactly the case in the US and the world today. But let's look at an example from the US. The Media Research Center in the US carried out a short study and found the following. And it viewed some 1,007 evening news stories about the Trump White House on ABC, CBS, NBC from June the 1st to September the 30th. And this is equivalent to about 32.7 hours of coverage. Of those stories, 92% were negative about the president, v just 8% positive. But that's because Trump is a bad president and no one likes him, I hear you say. But if the media is biased, how would you know? You wouldn't. That's how propaganda works. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. How can you have any other opinion if you've only ever been given one opinion to consider? And this is just an example of how the media in the wrong hands with too much power can actually make public opinion instead of reflecting it. And if it makes public opinion based on lies and falsehoods, then our society will be based on lies and falsehoods. Now, I'm not commenting here on whether President Trump is a good leader or not. What I'm saying is that without fair representation in the press on all matters, the public is not an informed public. It's a manipulated public. And through the current consolidation of the media comes the death of the true journalist. Where are the true unbiased investigative journalists going to publish their stories if that story reports negatively on the media owners' other interests? Under a global free society, we can end this worrying global trend. Without power and money corrupting the media channels, we can now revert back to objective and free reporting, free from the owners' interests and free from politicians, PR and spin. Although the system I propose utilises one global channel responsible for reporting our news, we will have removed all the motivations other than the need for reporting fairly and evenly on all issues affecting the world and our society. Of course, you would still have certain left or right leanings in the reports, but now you can be driven by the individual reporter's views and not dictated to by the owner, and that's the key point. And it's probably not being too overdramatic when I say that humanity must address this problem if we're to truly progress as a species. We must build a society that values the truth, not just in our media, but also in all areas of society, including our history books. I think Malcolm X said it best. The media is the most powerful entity on earth. They have the power to make the innocent guilty and to make the guilty innocent, and that's power, because they control the minds of the masses. I would also suggest that we take the opportunity to open all sealed documents within our society that do not put countries' security at risk. We have a right to know what has been done in our name, and we have a right to know if anything has been covered up so we can stop history repeating itself. Some people will understand far more where I'm coming from here than others, but unsealing all documents that do not constitute a risk to public safety is a necessity of an open and honest society. Tactic 10. Population control through regional development. Now, if you ask most people about the world population, that they'll tell you it's growing out of control and possibly one of the biggest concerns facing mankind today. But is that true? To answer that, we have to consider what the maximum amount of people we can maintain here on planet Earth. And there are many estimates, as the variables that could affect this number are also very huge. Unfortunately, this area of research is still quite underdeveloped, and changes in the global situation affect the assessments continually. Taking a quick straw poll of the estimated number of population that is thought to be sustainable is set between 10 and 20 billion, so quite a big difference of opinion. And with a world population of 7 billion plus today, we're already getting near that first estimated figure, which may be a worry to some, but unnecessarily so according to Hans Rosling. Hans Rosling is a Swedish medical doctor, academic, statistician and public speaker. He's a professor of international health at the Karolinska Institute and co-founder and chairman of the Gapminder Foundation. Hans has been working on the world population trends and forecasts for many years now. His own experience and research tells a story of an increasing global population, but one that reaches its peak at the end of the century with a total of 11 billion, almost within the lower forecasts of the lower estimated sustainability. The reason for this, Hans explains, is that we have reached the age of the peak child. At present, there are roughly 2 billion children aged between 0 and 14. And predictions from the UN are that this number will remain until the end of the century. The population will continue to grow as the peak child generation grows up and grows older. So most probably 3 or 4 billion new adults will be added to the world population. But then in the second half of the century, the fast growth of the world population will finally come to an end. What has driven this is that the average number of children brought into the world by each family has fallen from 5 to just 2.5. And during this global change, we've seen several factors. Many families in developing regions have many children, as the mortality rate can be as high as 40%. And research and experience has shown that child mortality rates and family sizes are inextricably linked. And as regions develop and society prospers through better healthcare, education and family planning advice, the average family size reduces. Average lifespans also increase as a result of these developments. In Bangladesh over the last 40 years, the average family size has dropped from 7 to just 2, as life expectancy has grown from an average of 50 years to 70 years. And Europe is a great example of a population that has reached its natural peak of growth by the effects of a developed society. As a fully developed society and enjoying all the benefits associated with that, the natural population growth rate in Europe is just 0.21. And most of the predicted global growth in the next part of our century comes from Asia and Africa. Asia is predicted to grow to a maximum of 5 billion by the end of the century, with Africa at 4 billion and the Americas and Europe levelling at about 1 billion each, according to Hans. Although I've just presented a very brief summary of Hans's extensive findings, there is a very compelling and difficult to ignore argument that if we want to slow down a world population growth to a manageable and sustainable number, we have to develop the poorer areas in our global society. Some researchers into the higher predicted figures of sustainability population argue that as society develops, it will find better and more efficient ways of producing food and power. And that will allow the sustainable population figure to be much higher, maybe around 20 million. If this is true, then the very strategies and tactics that we're discussing in the Global Free Society will only expedite this natural plateau of population much, much faster. Housing. But where would we put everyone? Where would they live? Now, one thing we're really not short of on planet Earth is space. And we could easily house 20 billion people comfortably if we were creative and if we used forethought. And a silly fact I remember reading is that if you took the entire population of planet Earth and put them in Australia, each person would have a square metre all to themselves. I have no idea if that's true or not, but it did get me thinking. Now, if you took that square metre and then built another level for people to live on, it would be 2 square metres. 4 levels, 4 square metres. So nothing too unusual here so far. But then if you dug down the equivalent of another 4 levels, that would be 8 square metres per person, etc., etc. And this would then leave all other countries on the planet completely uninhabited. And obviously, this is not what I'm proposing. The example is just to give an idea and perspective of the availability of options we have to address housing. The moral of the story is that space isn't an issue. We can go up and we can go down. And underground constructions offer us an almost inexhaustible supply of housing possibilities. If needs must, then this will allow us to provide good quality housing for the projected 20 billion with all services necessary and not greatly increase the global footprint above land. We don't need to take over any more of our planet's natural habitat. And we could even look to build floating cities to house our growing population if that was necessary, as Jack Fresco so convincingly explains on the Venus Project website. And as the planet is covered in almost 70% water, then this might not be as silly as it first sounds. There are many options open to us, and now we've removed the false barriers of the monetary system, we're only restricted by our resources and our own ingenuity. So housing the population is really not going to be a problem. However, feeding them could prove a more challenging task. But like the topic of housing, if we think outside the box, we can find new ways that will provide the answer. So, food production. Just as we looked at solutions for housing that went up and went down, we can also apply that thinking to food production. One initial example would be vertical or tower growing. And this is where plants are grown in greenhouses in vertical containers going as high as is practical to maintain and harvest. And with the right setup and equipment, there is virtually no limits. And there are many benefits to this form of food production, such as pesticide-free and more predictable and consistent crops. And as an example, a 48 foot by 48 foot greenhouse can produce an amazing 135,000 plants per year. And the land currently used for growing these types of foodstuffs can then be utilised for growing crops that cannot be grown vertically, such as wheat and barley. And this form of farming is also much more efficient when considering water usage. So why don't we use this system now on a mass scale? Really, because of the financial considerations. It's not as profitable as it needs additional financial investment, which will make a much longer period to show a financial return. However, there are already many people growing crops in this manner, albeit on a local and small scale basis. But it also means that we can look at growing larger crops underground. So as in the example for the housing, where we build housing many levels down, we can also build facilities over multiple levels underground just for growing crops. And this method is not a reality with the monetary system, as it would cost far too much financially. But now we've ended the monetary system, we could view this investment in our resources as a very shrewd investment in our future. We have plenty of space underground, and it will allow automation of maintenance as well as harvesting, which are very key strategies as we've already discussed. And power generation can come through choosing suitable construction sites that will allow us to tap into the sustainable and ecologically friendly geothermal energy naturally produced by the planet. Or we can rely on the ever-increasing efficiency in the solar panel industry. And this, coupled with the latest developments in LED lighting, it means our energy consumption is relatively low and completely sustainable. And of course, free energy would be an absolute game changer in this area. Reducing all job roles in areas where manpower can easily be replaced is one of our aims as a society, so this form of farming suits our long-term plans very well. Because remember, this is a marathon and not a sprint. We don't have to build these facilities overnight or from day one. This could be part of our medium to long-term plan. And this solution would also allow us to increase the space required for farming livestock. And as we've discussed earlier, our goal would be to greatly increase the standards within animal welfare and move away from horrific practices of factory farming. But for that, we would need more space, more land. Well, now we have that possibility. Imagine for a minute if what I told you about Hans Rosling's research was completely wrong. Population growth did not plateau, but instead kept rising. Under the current monetary and political systems, some very big decisions will need to be made globally. And the only solution the current system can offer, I believe, is to limit you on the size of your family, to limit your choice of house, your car. Maybe you have to live in a city unless you are a necessary worker. And where do you think these restrictions would end? Under the guise of saving the planet, the elected governments controlled by the industrial giants could enforce any laws, rules or regulations they see fit upon you, because you've deferred your power to them willingly. And of course, they would sell these restrictions to you as saving the planet and you're a great citizen. But that's not a situation I want to leave to my children, do you? There are many solutions open to us if we move away from the limitations of the monetary system. And I would rather face all challenges through a system of pure democracy than the corrupted system we currently have in place today. Let me ask you, what other alternatives are there? Tactic 11, religion and spirituality. I think it should be obvious that the global free society cannot operate as a theocracy, as that would go against the core values of personal freedom. However, everyone would of course freely follow any religion they see fit. And religion plays a major part in many people's lives on the planet today. Therefore, we must accommodate these wishes and incorporate religion into our society. And to do it in a way that ensures all religions are catered for equally. And my solution would be to form a spiritual core council. And this council's role will be to ensure that all religious needs are met and each religion gets a fair share of any resources it may require, within reason. Although we will accommodate all religions, their practices must not conflict with our society's freedoms in any way. That's not to say we would ban them, as this would go against our core values. Instead, our only option would be to withdraw our services and our resources. We could not support any religion that goes against such basic principles as freedom. We could not support any religion that dictates their will and enforces that will through intimidation in any way. So all religions that allow for their followers to choose to what degree they follow that religion could be or would be supported. And we have no room in a free society for anyone to force their will upon anyone, even if it is done in the name of religion. Tactic 12. Global ecological solutions based on need resource and knowledge. In the book I look briefly at alternative thinking on ideas and projects that have the potential to change the world but were never given a chance. And I looked at solutions put forward not by top scientists but by normal people, often at the coalface of the particular issue or problem. And I discuss solutions to global concerns such as the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, desertification, alternative solutions to harmful pesticides, as well as the benefits of utilising hemp on an industrial level. And the idea behind this tactic is that there is a strong possibility that these solutions were overlooked or ignored because they did not offer an easily quantifiable return on investment. And of course I'm talking financial return. The ecological or environmental return always takes a backseat. Some of the solutions, it could be argued, would challenge and therefore pose a potential threat to the current financial systems in place. There is no benefit for us to look at this in detail now, but please feel free to download the free PDF version. But what is worth considering as we wrap up this final chapter is how reassuring it could be now to live in a world where the actions and decisions of our society are always with our interests and our planet's interests at heart. You may not agree with every decision, but you will know that each and every decision is made by your fellow citizen that have exactly the same to gain or lose as you do. This strategy, a combination of tactics, was never meant to represent a complete list of new approaches or solutions. That would take several books in itself, at least. Instead, it was to show how we can utilize a consolidated technology to make life far simpler in our private lives and our career. We can also use technology to assure ourselves of quality in all aspects of the goods and services we are provided, a fair return for our own personal time and effort. And we can now globally address real healthcare in so many ways, especially making prevention a main strategy. And prevention can only realistically be accomplished through a healthier mind in conjunction with a healthier food supply. They have to go hand in hand. So a healthier mind because we have no financial worries and we prioritise our leisure time. And a healthier body because we now prioritise a healthier diet and we have better quality food. So we can now look at the laws that we have been forced to abide by. Maybe even realise that we're actually very intelligent beings that can think and act for ourselves. And that would be handy, as we can now find a way to ensure that the people working in the various media channels are doing what they want to do without compromising their own morals and ethics. And again, this would be a benefit because when we do have to face the difficult decisions around population growth, we would need the true facts to be reported to us, not some political or industrial elite's worldview. So this section was to start a wider discussion on how we can relook at the way we view all the systems and practices we have in place today. And I think it's becoming more and more obvious that when you remove the controls and restrictions artificially imposed by the current financial and political systems, we have infinite choice. We can do what we do best as humans. We can be creative, imaginative, compassionate, inspiring and courageous, with a cracking sense of humour, of course. So how would this affect you in your own personal life, in your career? And what are your ideas?